Hi, I'm Erica of the Knit Kind podcast and Grapefruit and Gardenia Designs. You can find me on Ravelry with a username NittyElf40, NittyElf40, and you'll find details of a lot of the projects that I speak about here. I know it's been a couple of weeks since we've chatted, and I don't have a very formal podcast planned, but I do have some finished objects to show you, some works in progress to show you, a quick update about what I've been doing, and a couple other highlights. So during this week of gratitude, I wanted to thank you for being part of the community, for part of our fiber arts community who shows up with kindness and the idea that a rising tide lifts all ships, and just supporting each other, whether it's through making or just being a good neighbor to someone. So let's see. I thought we could, start with some finished objects. I have blocking right now my first wearable piece that I made with handspun yarn, and that is the Waverly Weekend Cowl. I don't have it to show you right now, but I will next time, and I'm really excited. I spun that on the electric eel wheel. You might see behind me, right here, my big holiday gift that I have invited any family members who are having trouble with a gift to contribute toward. I did get the Ashford E-Spinner 3. So I have spun my first singles on that, but I haven't yet plied them. But let's just say I did my graduated tool. I loved learning to spin on a drop spindle, tried the E-Spinner with the electric eel wheel, and now at the Fiber Festival of New England from Mainely Fiber, I think is who I purchased it from. I'll do another update on that at some point. But I did go with the Ashford E-Spinner 3. I was looking at that. I couldn't see a Hansen in person. I didn't make it to Rhinebeck. And so far, so good. I think it's a beautiful machine that accomplishes what I was looking for. So I'll update you more about that later and show you the handspun cowl. But in the meantime, I did finish my All Points South, which is a pattern by Casapinka. It is a non-poncho, otherwise known as a poncho, unless you have a teenage daughter who doesn't let you call it a poncho. As you can see, I really wanted to do this in fall colors, and I wanted to talk about a few things about this other than the wearability, which I don't have it on today, but I will in a future. You don't have to fuss with anything. You just put it right on, and it's so wearable. What I really wanted to highlight about this, though, were two of the yarns that I used. One is the Good Karma Farms yarn, and that's this yellow one. And another is Wonderland Farms Mad Hatter, and that's this one here. And the reason I wanted to highlight those two is because just as I get more in touch with this fiber journey and the characteristics of specific wools, they're so springy. And that's something right at this moment that I'm just appreciating more than ever. So you wool lovers out there will know what I mean by that. People who maybe don't use wool, but their reason for not using it is because they think of it as scratchy, or maybe how wool has been historically. Go out there and feel wool again. If I could encourage you to do one thing, wool is such, in many cases, is such a good choice for our environment, for things we wear. It has heating and cooling properties that work with your body temperature and the weather, the elements. And it also is a renewable resource. Sheep giveth, and they only taketh away in grass and land space, which I know is also something, but more on that later with our visit to Vermont. So this is my All Points South shawl by Casapinka. I followed the instructions exactly, other than making an additional color change here, which was yarn management for me. And I love it. It's beautiful. I can't wait to wear it possibly tomorrow. For those of you who celebrate Thanksgiving, I wish you a wonderful holiday with your family, and I hope you have a chance to realize all the things that we're grateful for, even though I know we are also all struggling with things at the same time. And for our native population, I hope that we are all finding ways to talk about the real history of Thanksgiving and find gratitude, find common ground, and do so in a way that can be inclusive for everyone, whether it is on the day of tomorrow or in the season of gratitude. So I will leave it at that as well. I hope that we can all understand that. Other finished projects that I have many of you know, if you've been watching, that I've worked with Junction Fiber Mill yarn, and this is their latest knit along. Let's see if I can put it on. Maybe I should show it to you first and then put it on. I did the Read This hat. My hat starts with it doesn't start with a heart. It starts with knit, kind, heart, be kind, heart. And it is in the Making Tracks. And I'd have to look. It's their cream colored yarn, but I think this one might actually be a Savage Heart Farm natural color. I don't think it's a mill blend. It might be a Farm Fresh. It will say my Ravelry project. So here's this. For the Making Tracks, I used Vermont Vice, which you can probably tell if you're familiar with their colorways. And I was prepared to do color management. So color management in this case would mean I have this color changing yarn, and I knew I wanted my brim to be the hot pink. So I actually did select this skein in person. I actually got two, partially because I wanted to make sure I had the right one I wanted to use, and also I wanted to have enough that I could do a matching cowl at some point. So I knew I wanted it to have the bright pink along the edge, and what that meant was that since it's a doubled brim, I was going to have to get into that bright pink pretty quickly, and I was hoping, and let me actually show you, because when you're working with color changing yarn, there is a way to really look at the skein. Once you it's twisted, once you untwist it and look at the skein, you can get a sense if you wrap that skein to approximately the circumference of what you're knitting. So if it's a sweater, it's going to be bigger. If it's a hat, it's going to be smaller. If it's a sock, it's going to be even smaller. And you can see about how long you're going to have for that color. And of course, it's not going to be the exact 1-to-1 ratio because you're making a knit stitch, right? So you're doing this. And so every one of those, but you can get a sense of how that is going to work out. And so as you can see, I had my skein worked out perfectly where I was able to start here at the cast on, and then I got into that bright pink so it would show up exactly where I wanted to. And I knew whatever was here really wasn't going to show. And this worked out perfectly for this hat because I do love the marls. If this was in the yoke of a sweater, it would be beautiful. But for the hat, I wanted it to be a little bit more solid and a little bit less marled. So it couldn't have worked out better. You flip it over, get your bright pink here, and then I was prepared to use a solid for my letters. But I didn't have to because the point that I reached in the color changing yarn, it was dark enough with enough contrast and a low enough marl that it shows up. I did sketch in the hearts myself, but the pattern comes with all of the letters. It also comes with a great tool to help you know how many spaces you have. And what other piece of it? There was some other piece of it that I can't remember right now. A tool, a chart, maybe that's what it was. It comes with 2 Junction Fiber Mill and knit purl, and then it comes with an empty one that you can fill out yourself. So a couple of things I did here. One thing I would not do again is I actually sized up to a size 7 needle for the stranded work because I usually do size up a needle size for my color work, stranded color work. But I think in this particular case, if I make another one, I think I'm going to just stick to a 6. And then I casted on 100 stitches, I think. instead of 104, and then I added 4 more after the brim because I like a couple of things. I like to come down over my ears. I live in New England. The wind can be brutal, so I want it to be long enough to come over my ears, and I want it to be snug enough. And my last hat I made was a little bit loose, if you watched that one, so I think I just decided to keep it tighter. My head circumference is about 21 to 21 and a half inches, somewhere in that ballpark. And then the other thing I did, and this was have to do with your row gauge, I actually added 2 rounds before I started the decrease. I think 2 or 3. I wanted a little bit more color change to show up. I wanted my top to be pink. So it all fell perfectly. I have my Knit Kind, Be Kind hat. There are a lot of really fun examples of things people wrote. If you do one, I guess swears are allowed, but keep it nice. If you're going to swear about something, and you put it on your hat, encourage kindness too, I guess. But there are some great messages check them out in Ravelry and people's projects, or if you're on Instagram and not in Ravelry, I think they're using a hashtag of JFMKAL. There's things about art, books, science research. What else did I see out there? There's a lot of really fun ones. Some people put the colorway name in it. So I've been thinking about all different things to do. And one of the things I was thinking about too was doing maybe a knit for food hat, which could be something that you offer to give away to one of your donors if you do that. I know on Laura Nelkin's podcast, she discovered Junction Fiber Mill yarn recently, and so I was already thinking about a knit for food hat, and then that made me think about it even more. So that event will be in March this year, but I don't think that the dates have been announced. All right, I'll move on from that, I think. Oh, I did not do what I'm wearing. I don't want to take my hat off now. It's so cozy. What I'm wearing is the Moonrise Shawl by Olive Knits, Marie Greene. I did it as part of a knit along maybe 2 years ago now. It's one of my favorite shapes for a shawl, and I do love this one. It's a triangle shawl. So it's very easy to wear, just having it come down in front. And then wrapping it around. And I absolutely love the yarn that I used for this and want to highlight that as much as the pattern. So the yarn that I used, the orange is the Isager Alpaca 2, or the Isager 2, which is an alpaca yarn. And then the cream color here is, I think it's a mushroom bisque is the colorway. It is the Alpaca Yarn Company Mariquita, which I've talked about before, and that's what the brown is here too. So I just love these for fall colors. I love alpaca yarn is just beautiful, especially if you use it in a project where you want the characteristics of drape, softness. There's a little bit of lace in here, and you can just really stretch that out when you block it, and it's gorgeous, and it could not feel better around your neck. I love how this feels. This is woolly. I love how this feels. It is, an alpaca, and it is like incredibly soft, buttery soft. So I love all animal fibers, but they do all have different characteristics to them. Okay, another finished object I have, and I think the last finished objects I'm going to talk about today. I do have a couple others to share, but I'm going to save them for a more thematic time. This is sort of the theme of gratitude, fall colors, and maybe a little bit into hats and quick projects, because it is the season we start to get into some of that. Some of us get into some gift knitting. It's hit or miss, but I realized I had not knit one of my own Fels caps in a while, and it's a really fun pattern when you just want to get a little color work fix, or you just want to get a hat made. It's a great project for scraps. It is done in a heavy DK or a light worsted. This is the one I made this time. And can you see all the design? There are 2 different brims that come with the pattern that are different than what you usually see. Of course, you can choose your own. If you have a favorite brim you like to use, of course you can substitute it. But if you're looking to try something new, this is kind of neat. You can see on the inside that this looks a little bit different. There's a slip stitch in the middle. So it's a 5-stitch ribbing with a slip stitch, which makes it a stretchy brim. And so the directions when you're doing a folded brim, you're not going to see the slip stitch on the outside. You're going to see this elongated stitch in the middle. And when you're doing a non-folded brim, just a simple brim, you're going to see this from the beginning. So the instructions are slightly different, but it creates the same brim. And again, that's what it looks like on the inside. So there are the 2 different brims. There is one pattern, if you will, for this color work, but there are 3 different options. There's an option with 3 colors, 4 colors, or 5 colors. And of course, due to your heart's content, you can mix it all around. But the way that the palette works, has some symmetry from top to bottom with how those colors are placed. And people have done variegated, they've done solids, they've done tonals, they've done speckles. It shows up differently, whether you want to have high contrast or low contrast. And then there are 3 different brims to choose from. And this is one. And there are 2 others. So that's, again, the Fels cap. And that is one of my patterns. Great for scraps, great for gifts. It knits up pretty quickly. I've done it in Malabrigo Rios. I've done it in a local hand-dyed yarn that has a cashmere blend in it, and that's really soft. I've done it in So Happy Jane yarn. I was actually thinking, I don't quite have enough scraps yet of my Junction fiber mill yarn, but it would be a fun one to do with, especially with their solids. But then there's also a way you could work in a making tracks and make it interesting too. So, Fels cap. Those are my 3 most recent finished objects, other than my cowl that is blacking. I have a couple of whips, works in progress, for those of you who don't use the acronym. Out of words a little bit. So I had this hat hibernating. I'm not a big fingering non-shawl knitter yet. I've done some of the sweaters with a bigger gauge. The thought of a fingering hat at the time, I was like, you got to be kidding me. But I try to embrace it more. And it's really, this one, it only has 120 stitches around, I think. So it's really not that much more than the other ones. But this is Treasure Goddess yarn. I had gotten this and was, gosh, I'm saying a lot today. I think I'm tired. I was doing a beanie pattern, and I loved it and it was very interesting, but I decided in the end I didn't want to continue with that pattern, so it's been hibernating. And so what I decided to do was one of 2 things. My college, this is very close to the blue of my college, and I thought about doing something similar to the Read This Hat before that even came out, where I did something where I wrote, either my alma mater or Go mascot. I might not say it because it can be polarizing. You know how college sports can be. But maybe I will eventually if I end up doing that. Or one of the things that I did find, and I thought this was a pattern worth sharing with you as we go into winter. See if I can pull it up. It is called Ferguson, Ferguson, by Galt House of Yarn. And it's this, which I just thought was a really nice colorwork pattern. Wintry, a Scandinavian look to it, which I love. And then one of the projects is in blue. It's in the wrong color blue. That might give you a hint what my alma mater is, but it's really pretty. I like the blue. I don't discriminate on the blues, just on the basketball teams. So that's one of my whips. And then my other whip, where I have been, I didn't mention that. I haven't had so much time to do a podcast because I've been doing some of my other volunteer work. And then I have been teaching. So I just finished 2 courses. I did a Learn to Knit series at our local library, and I did a designer workshop for the Aquina Cowl. And so my other whip, when I do those workshops, I have swatches, and then sometimes I have a full project. And I decided to do a full project for this one. So it's my Aquina Cowl, and I did this one in the Malabrigo Mecca, which is what the pattern was written for, in Lotus and Gray Green. And that's a combination I hadn't done before. I love Lotus. I've used Lotus on other bases for Malabrigo, but I hadn't used it in the Mecca yet, and it's going to be really pretty, I think. It's a low contrast pattern where it can be. It's written to be low contrast, but there are different ways to work around that too. And so here are the colorways in the balls. So pretty. I love colors. I really did get into more serious knitting with more refined yarns because of the colors, and recently have followed more of the farm yarn. And when I do knit with something like this, I am reminded how much I love that, and there are ways to tie it all together. So for those of you who watched the Junction Fiber Mill Millcast, they had Cowgirl blues on this week. And it was interesting because I have some Cowgirl blues that I stashed in the spring specifically to do a Grapefruit Gardenia shawl, because they had a color that was, because of everything about the company and the yarn that I had learned so far. And then also because when I was looking at it, they had a colorway that was ruby grapefruit and another one called the River, and together it looked like Grapefruit Gardenia to me, so I had to get that, and I will be designing in it. And that recent podcast was a little prompt that maybe that will be the next thing I take out to design and play with, so we'll see. So those are my whips. I do have a couple of things coming up that I'd like to do podcasts for. One is holiday stockings, or specifically Christmas stockings. And I have some information gathered for that, but I want to make that a more planned, thoughtful podcast and make sure that I have physical examples I can hold up and show you, and also have patterns pulled up, or maybe it might even be nice, probably be nicer, if instead of just holding up my iPad and showing you the patterns, I actually inserted some photos of different patterns and pattern suggestions. So that, and then maybe also a gift theme. And actually on the gift theme, I'm going to show you one little thing I picked up for myself. I have been I mentioned Fiber Festival of New England, and going up to Junction Fiber Mill's open house when we did a whole weekend in Vermont, and it was exactly what we needed. It was my 1 weekend off of teaching this fall. Of course, I love the teaching part, don't get me wrong, but it was nice to have a little pause and have a weekend to be able to get away with my family. And I've also gone to local craft fairs and artisan fairs. So there was one that is in Wellesley, Massachusetts, put on by the juniors, and that is a very comprehensive and fantastic show that's a lot of work to put on. I'm going to show you some things, not necessarily things, I'm going to show you some vendors from that at some point if we do this gift theme. And then I also went to one at Needham High School in November, earlier in November. It is November. I feel like it's December already, but we have another week. And at that one, I got myself this little gift that I'm going to share with you because it's not made for knitters, but a lot of knitters were buying them, and I suggested that it could be something that could be marketed to knitters. So it is this sweet little bag. See the bottom, see the inside. It's nothing fancy in terms of attributes of the bag, like pockets or zippers or anything like that. It doesn't have them, but it is like just this little bag. It is, let's see if I can hold this up, Desjardins design. I hope I did that justice. Eco-conscious hand-dyed botanical creations. This particular one is indigo dyed, botanical dyed. It's cotton. You can hand wash it, hang it to dry. She also makes things in linen and silk. And her name is Shawl. Here's, if you can see, I'm going to hold this up for, is that going to focus? Probably not. I will try to put it in the show notes. But what I'm using it for as a knitter and why I want to show you, I wanted a bag to attempt to learn to walk and knit. And this one was pretty and it was different. And so I can just put this on my wrist, have my project in there, and knit and walk. And it's not like maybe I will be doing it a ton. I don't have plans to do it a ton, but I wanted to just give it a go. And I thought this was a really pretty, really lightweight, fun bag to do it for a single skein project. I even had my Read This hat in it, I think, when I went up to Vermont. And my husband very graciously drove, so I got to knit in both directions. Although I finished my hat when I was up there. So I was working on something else on the way back, probably my All Points South. And so you can do that, or you can make it, I know I did this at some point, you can make it longer and put it over your shoulder. With 1 and 1. So then if you put it over your shoulder, you can sort of close it up a little bit there and put it right over your shoulder. And if on your wrist doesn't feel good, you can have it this way and you can walk and knit too. So really cute if you're looking for a little way to treat yourself and support another maker and one who's working with botanical dyes and just some fun things like that. So fun. That's it. I have more recommendations. Oh, you know what? I do have one more thing to show you super quickly. I told you I went to Vermont. I hope I didn't say Maine at one point. Maine was last year, and I bought from Maine vendors at New England Fiber Festival. But the two places other than Junction Fiber Mill that we visited in Vermont were Norwich Knits. And I debated. They did have some really beautiful yarn there that I thought about for a sweater quantity. But I have to tell you, I think I'm holding out for some of those Savage Heart Farm lambs and sheep after I have met them in person. Or the other, gosh, what's the name of it? The Farm Fresh line that they're using now. That's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't think of it right now. The flock that they're working with, where they have the beautifully dyed colors. I think my next sweater quantity purchase will be one of those. Or maybe not my next one, but one that's soon. In the meantime, I bought this. This is Hands and Heart Farm. It says wool yarn blankets, roving skins breeding stock. It is a 2-ply DK yarn. Somewhere, here's where I read it. An off-the-grid farm in, I learned it's not Charlotte, it's Charlotte, I believe, Vermont, where Border Leicester and Romney sheep are lovingly raised for show, breeding stock, and pets. Border Leicester and Romney wool is beautiful, versatile, lustrous, and long. Great for felting, spinning, weaving, and knitting. And a lot of times I shy away from my favorite colors because I like to diversify, which is good. But sometimes you got to just go back to those colors you love. So this just reminds me of the colors of hydrangea on Martha's Vineyard, Cape Cod, around Massachusetts, in general, New England. And I haven't actually untied this one yet, so you're gonna be looking at it with me for the first time in this way. But I really just felt like those colors were so pretty, with the purples to the blues and the turquoises, and I wanted to support a local shop, and then also a local farm while we were up there. And if I was going to do the souvenir skein, this was the one that jumped out to me. There were so many beautiful ones, but I thought this one was gorgeous. And then at, see it over? No, wait, it's not over my shoulder anymore. This one here, Scratch Supply Company, I got roving, and I got a few breed-specific wools to try spinning on my new spinner. So those are put away, but when I take them out to spin them, I will either take some pictures or record or do something there on spinning. So that is it. I hope that you have a wonderful week. I hope that you can focus on gratitude, even if things are challenging or more complicated for you. I hope that you knit kindly, that you live kindly, and that you just help spread some joy in the world. Thank you so much for being part of the community.